when I go to Hawaii now and pipe's pumping, you know what I do? I put on fins and I sit right in the channel, right in that zone, because I know the wave really, really well.
Yeah.
And just witnessing pipeline.
Nice.
Almost in the impact zone and just slithering through like an eel and coming up and watching.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And you don't even have a board. You're just.
And I've had guys paddle out and be like, Malloy, what are you doing? You know, you fucking went crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm good. This is all
beautiful.
Maybe I'll have Uncle Mark Cunningham on this side of me.
Yeah.
Or Adam Lerner here.
Yeah.
And stay cruising.
That's so nice. That's so nice. That was Chris Malloy. I'm Jamie Brisick. This is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Surfer's Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, TSJ brings you 128 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more or to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. I first met Chris in Hawaii. I was new to journalism, and I'd gotten the assignment to write about young Californians charging on the North Shore. Chris topped the list. The oldest of the Malloy brothers, he, Keith, and Dan were part of the Momentum generation. Chris was warm, kind, smart, curious. He was less interested in climbing the competitive ranks than surfing the world's great waves and meeting his surfing heroes. He traveled to remote corners of the globe with his eyes and mind wide open. He had an old soul's understanding of surfing and surf culture, and he poured it into his first film, Thicker Than Water. Next came the September sessions. For a while, he simultaneously occupied 2 major posts. He was one of the world's great free surfers, and he was also one of the world's great surf filmmakers. Making films would eventually subsume his surf career. He directed 180 Degrees South, Come Hell or High Water, Fisherman's Son, and many more. Chris is the co-founder of Farm League, where he tells stories via commercials, films, and television. He lives on a ranch in Los Alamos, California. But we spoke at his cousin Emmett Malloy's house in Ojai. Emmett and his brother Brendan are also filmmakers. Emmett had an archive of Chris's extensive body of work, which we watched before talking. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm so happy for the chance to sit and talk with you. And we're here in Ojai, where I grew up, and it's raining, and it feels like right where I want to be.
Good. Now, where we want to be, there's so much. I'm trying to find a good starting point. I guess here's a place to start. You've done a lot in your surfing life. What sits in your head as being the highlight?
I would say, for sure, growing up here in Ojai, my dream was to surf in the eddy. That was my big dream. I know I didn't have the ability to, win the Pipe Masters, even though I dedicated so much of my life to that wave. I knew I wasn't like the other guys and be on tour like the other guys, but I knew that if I worked hard enough, and committed enough, that there was a chance I could surf in Eddie's contest. And so to get to paddle out and surf the Eddie was by far like the thing that, everything else is tied for second. All the Indo trips with, Tommy Carroll or Kelly and all that stuff, that all goes together as just one big 20-year, adventure. But surfing the Eddie was really special for me.
So the Eddie is an interesting one because one of my early journalism assignments was to write about Chris Malloy for Surfer magazine. Yeah. And as I remember, you've told me that was the first piece you had, like a profile type piece in the magazine. I'm guessing it would have been 92, 93.
Yeah.
And so a lot was happening at that time. You were from Ventura, Ojai, and you were spending a lot of time on the North Shore, and you were running with folks who love to charge big waves.
Yeah. That was really prior to when the Momentum generation gelled, Taylor Steele was just getting to the North Shore, and I think him, he was literally living in a van. And, luckily I'd competed against Kelly and Shane and Rob in different kid events, right? Like it's just drums and SSA stuff. So those are the only guys I really knew on the North Shore. And then of course they were hanging out at the Hill House. So all of a sudden I'm sitting there next to Todd Chester at a barbecue, and Himalayas is right out the back door, and Brock's there. And it was kind of one of those things where, you know, when it got big, you know, it was like there might be 3 guys out at those outer reefs. And if you wanted to go out, because nobody did, you know, at that time, pre-ski, pre-vests and all the stuff, it was like everybody mysteriously got a sore knee or their back was sore. So there was only a few guys. So if you were willing to paddle out, then I feel like that's when those, you know, especially like Brock and Chester and those guys were like, all right, this kid can hang. Like he's, you know, and thank God West Lane had left some big boards, big boards under Ronald Hill's house. And those guys were like, just grab one of those, scrub all the mud off it, put some new wax on it. And I was like chasing those guys down the trail and, you know, during those days. And so, yeah. And if you were willing to take the abuse, you know, physical and verbal abuse for long enough, it was like, you were, you know, part of the crew. And so.
No, and I remember it as being, because I knew those guys well, and it was almost like if we'd gone away to college and joined like a fraternity, the kind of hazing that went on, like there was almost that version in the surf culture. It was sort of like, we're riding giant waves, but we're not going to like gently bring you in. We're going to like toss you in the thick of it kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, Brock was always like pushing it to a limit where you were like, some of that stuff hurt, you know, you're like, should I be here right now? But then in retrospect, you're like, if it weren't for Brock, you know, the way that we were able to kind of like forge ahead and experience some of those, especially those outer reefs. And, you know, it was Brock was always the Pied Piper, you know, even though he would encourage you to paddle out with him by saying, by calling you a pussy and being like, you won't go. That was a big thing that like, and Kelly was big into that. You won't go.
Yep.
You won't go. And that was like, it was like, are you going to?
Yeah.
And it was, you know, but it was all because we wanted to. It was all fun.
No, it's so interesting because that was sort of a different generation. And first of all, the word pussy would not be used by any means today. And secondly, like that behavior would almost be called sort of bullying, but it was very effective in getting you out into giant waves, you know?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And that's like, you know, I grapple with you know, our culture today where it's very, sort of vanilla in its own way. And that like, if it weren't for Jay Adams and Brock and Marvin Foster, Mickey Nielsen, Dan Killaha, and those guys, like pushing you, and it was like, you know what, kid? They with their eyes, it'd be better if you weren't up for sitting on the boil at Pipe, because it'd be less people. But if you are going to, you don't waste that spot. Don't waste the space in the lineup, because we don't need detritus and flotsam and jetsam out here, you know. And it was very clear. So you if you were going to sit there, you were going to go.
Yeah, no, that's such an interesting one. I was talking to Strider Wasilewski about that recently, about the lineup at Pipeline, and he was describing how when he was sort of trying to find a spot in the lineup, he was saying that if you made a motion towards a wave, even if halfway in the middle of paddling you knew it was too late, you sort of had to go, because if you pulled back, then you were like at the back of the line for the next winter, you know?
Absolutely. And Strider and I are pretty much the exact same age, goofy foot kids, coming in and sitting at the bottom of the line. And like, I vividly remember, you know, going on waves at Pipe that I knew were not makeable. And because if you kept going on those waves, the elders would notice, you know. They're like, the kid's earning it. He knows he's not going to, it's got too much north in it, you know, it's going to explode on that last section no matter what. And like when Derek Ho's like, hey boy, go.
Yeah.
You go, or you're canceled that winter.
Yeah. Yep.
Done.
Yep. Your surf odyssey has been different. I mean, we've I think we pay a lot of attention to the World Surf League and what then was the ASP. But folks who do the traditional tour, they have rankings, they compete in events, they finish with a number next to their name at the end of the year. Wow, how's the rain? I like
amazing.
it. It's appropriate.
That's amazing.
But your surf odyssey was much more, I would say, traveling. First of all, traveling, and second of all, like exploring surfers throughout history that interested you. There was almost like a cultural mining that you were doing that I saw you doing first just out of curiosity and interest, and then you would do it with making films.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I knew the experience. I was abundantly aware of this lucky opportunity I had, and I did have a deep love for the surfing history because of my dad. He would tell me stories about Pat Curran and Greg Knoll and Ricky Gregg and Peter Cole when I was a little kid, and so when I went over and some of those guys were still in the water, it was like I just was pinching myself. You'd be in 1991 to be in the lineup sharing a lineup with Peter Cole and Kelly Slater. It was that convergence zone in history where, Al Chapman would be grumbling in the parking lot with the smoke and Dick Brewer's, in his car right behind them, and they're squabbling about something. And then, then here comes Ross Clark Jones and Tommy Carroll, and they've been up all night, and they're going to go out there and just to be, I felt like a fly on the wall, but then you hear the Rabbit KK call heat, and it's like, okay, so it's Tom Carroll, Brad Gerlach, and Chris Malloy. And you would just be like, you get goosebumps just to paddle out in those lineups. So it was a special time in surfing.
No, it's such an interesting thing what you just brought up, because I think about this a lot. When I was a pro surfer, it's like I climbed the amateur ranks and I wanted so badly to sort of arrive in this place. And when I arrived, I was still awestruck by the guys that I was supposed to quote unquote like go out and beat in the heat. And their posters were still on my wall at home. It's such a strange thing, because I think for most people with their whatever might be their sport, it's a rare thing when you kind of arrive into that group where you realize that instead of sort of looking up at those people, you're looking side to side because they're now your sort of peers, because you're in that echelon of competition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it was never lost on me that it's like, and I remembered and I wrote down all the, and then, just the experiences, and I really was watching. I was aware that like I wasn't going to be a Peter Pan and that we would age. And so I was always like taking note of their blueprints, right? So like you would think about, I'd be like watching Gerry, who was like one of the few guys at Pipe that like took me under his wing, and he didn't even know my name at first, and he was like just the Buddha that he is, even though, he got all the best waves, but and then you'd look at like Jay Adams and be like, "Oh, that's a super different trajectory," right?
Yes, yeah.
Marvin comes riding down the beach. He's at that time on Hawaii's Most Wanted. You see him on TV, and he's got a scabbard like he's riding a horse through the desert on his motorbike, riding down the beach at Pipe, going 50. Cops know who he is, where he is. And he's sort of, it's like, Poncho and Lefty, like they could have caught him any time,
Yep.
But like this is all happening at, at the same time. So I'm watching. Yeah. I'm just watching, almost feeling like like an imposter. Like I'm like, how am I getting to be here? So it was pretty neat if you cared about that stuff.
Well, I think you and your brothers, you guys assimilated well into the North Shore, which is not an easy one. It's just maybe a different set of rules, a different code, perhaps. There's an incredible clip of your brother Dan like fighting about 5 dudes and bodyboarders at Pipeline.
Sure.
But so it's I guess it's a tougher environment. It's a different sort of scene to make your way in than a lot of other places.
Yeah, and I think that what worked really well for us is that we grew up surfing between Point Conception and Point Mugu. So within that you've got Silver Strand and Oxnard and all the way up to the spots that are nestled up under east of Point Conception, all that zone, and it was a really hard place to grow up. Surfing, get your ass kicked,
Yeah.
So by the time we got to the North Shore, we could read a lineup really well and be like, don't mess with that motherfucker. You could just, we weren't like these like cloistered kids that were like, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Mr. Perry Dane, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yes.
We knew exactly
Yeah.
how to keep our heads down.
Yeah.
And that's palpable for those like apex surfers in the lineup. When Johnny Boy Gomes paddles past you and you put your head down,
Yeah.
you don't have eye contact.
Yeah.
And then he understands, cool. If that kid stays out of my way and catfishes a good one, good, fine.
Yep.
Whatever. Just, don't affect me at all.
Yeah.
And so we were ready. We had been groomed in areas that you don't fuck around in,
Yeah,
so
sure.
that helped a lot.
Yep. I remember being out at a spot on the west side that I won't mention the name of, but there was only a couple of us out, and it wasn't Johnny Boy, it was Perry Dane, but he paddled out, and I was there, and I was a haole, and I was the only white guy in the lineup. And I remember he paddled up to me, and I was doing exactly what you said, like, just don't look at him, just don't look at him. But he caught my eye, and he looks at me, and he just nods with his chin. He's like, go in already. And without a single thing, I just swung my board inlet and made about one stroke, and he went, hey, okay, you can surf.
Yeah.
But it was just like, as long as you know the rules, you can surf.
Well, I have one with Perry Dane, and I became real friendly with him over the years. But the first time I met him was at VLAN. So I was like, I'm not going out there because it was like Junior Maipono at that time. And, it was, you might find a Solomon Kane. It was, I'm like, no, I'm not going out. And my buddy Jay Vieira was like, no, you're with me. We're good. So we're out there. Of course, Jay gets a wave and I'm left with that lineup of guys. Right. And I'm like on a CI, and like, I don't know. And I just feel this tug on my leash and I'm like, fuck, this isn't good. And I was afraid to look back, and Perry just grabs my leash, then gets an ankle. It's all casual. And then grabs my shoulder and puts me face to face with him. And he's like a lion after they've made a kill. He's just kind of doing the RCA dog, like tilting his head, like looking at me, and I just froze. I didn't know. And all of a sudden I hear Jay in the background, Perry, hey, he's with me. And Perry's like, and just kind of just shoved me back out into, just kind of let me go as a catch and release type thing.
Yeah.
And then I think during that time I figured out that the lefts at VLAN are really good too. So that once those guys realized I was like surfing the lefts,
right?
Probably going to get in trouble for saying VLAN lefts are good, but I hear the lineup's pretty docile these days. So.
Yeah, interesting. You being so the Malloy brothers, you, Keith, and Dan, you being the oldest, did you feel like you had to look after your little brothers? Was it a thing where I always really admired you guys because you guys worked, you were a team,
Yeah. Well, yes and no. I mean, of course, it was always helpful to go in those early days to go together, right? Because there's the three of us and we're always looking out for each other, in terms of just keeping an eye on each other, and because we were in that position where you were going for waves nobody else wanted, not because they were so big, because they were straight closeouts, and
sure.
And the first time Dan surfed the North Shore proper, me and Sean Briley picked him up at the airport. I think he was 14. And we went straight to Haleiwa pumping. And that was he pulls up and proceeds to watch. We stand with Morris Cole. And it's the heat, the final, that Tom Kern wins. And the other ones were Tom Carroll, Johnny Boy, and it was the most stacked, incredible heat, like a legendary heat. Tom wins it, comes up. Dan witnesses that.
And this is when Tom surfed with no logos on his board, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
Huge deal. Everything about it.
It was subversive.
It was a big deal. And Dan's standing there as Morris Cole and Tom hug and this little board with no logos on it, which it was that for the time it was. And so Dan witnesses that, and then Briley's like, get in the truck. And so, boom, straight to pipe. So he paddles out at solid pipe at 14 with Sean Briley and me on either side of him. So, they got thrown into the fire for sure, but they could handle it. I never pushed them.
Yep. Your surf odyssey included meeting a lot of luminaries, many of whom were not with us anymore. But who was anyone leave a real lasting impression? Like you met Mickey Dora, for instance, hung out with him in Chile, as I remember.
Yeah. A funny story with him. Yeah, my friend Porter Turnbull, who's an underground legend, he goes, "Hey, Chris, the Mickey Dora's in town. I know you care about the elders." I said, "Yeah, wow, that's amazing." And that was that. And then about a week later, I got a call, and I pick up the phone. We're living there on Canoeing, and I just, "Hello, is Chris there?" "Yeah, this is Chris. This is Mick." And I'm like, "Hey, hi." I'm thinking I'm in trouble for something. And didn't know it was Mickey Dora. So he's like, "I'm going south. I heard you're going south." And he's like, this affectation he put on his voice. I never heard it before or after. It was like kind of like he was like a wise guy or something. And I'm like, "Yeah, actually, yeah, I am. I'm headed down to Antarctica with Doc Renneker." He goes, "I'm going south too." And I'm like, this is weird. So I am, and he's like, "I'm going to Chile." And I'm like, "Cool." And he's like, "I'm looking for somebody to travel with." And I'm like, "Well, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to Chile. I'm going straight to Ushuaia." And he's like, "Okay, thanks, bye." And I'm like, that was so weird. And about 2 minutes later, I'm like, that was fucking Mickey Dora. So back then you would do a star and a 69.
Oh, yeah.
It'd call that person back.
Sure.
So I'm on a lark. I'm like, star 69. And I'm like, "Mickey?" He's like, "Who's asking?" I'm like, "Yeah, you just called me. This is Chris." I'm like, you know what? I can leave a week early and like go to Chile,
Yep.
And I didn't know anything about those left point breaks. I knew nothing about it. So anyway, yeah, we proceeded to spend some good times together. He was one of those guys that we had a really good time together and got really, really good waves. And I got to, my dad had surfed with him back in the day and was like, "Man, keep your wallet in your front pocket around Dora, man." And he had been a guest at Lompoc, where I lived at the where I spent a ton of time.
Yep.
He was a guest at the prison there. And so I was like, what am I in for? But he was super gracious and sweet and had great stories. But he didn't inspire me to be like, his trajectory was, well, I guess in some ways, he was off looking for solitude and in his own way recording it. And I think, so many characters, whether it was Leroy Granis or John Peck or Pat Curran or George Greeno or even like Al Merrick and Peter Cole, those guys. The one that I really, really enjoyed spending my time with, and it was just a couple weeks in Byron Bay, but Bob McTavish, he just, what a wonderful soul, and what a, he let me shadow him around until I wanted him to make me bored. So finally he did, and I got to be there for that. But yeah, of all those characters, there's so many I got to spend a little bit of time with.
Who, if you were to think about all of them, because there have been many I know, did anyone, what I think about is all my surfing heroes, they usually start with great surfing, at least when I was really young. I mean, now I have a bit more of a holistic, I take in other qualities than just what you do in the water, sure. Although that is like the first thing that moves us. But I think for me, in some ways, some of my heroes in the water would not be people I would want to follow or use as models of how to live a good life. Of all the folks that you met, was there any that sort of not only like showed you the great surfing life, but showed you like how to live, if I could be so dramatic?
Yeah. And I will, like, again, like some of these folks I got to spend time with over the years, some were, a week, with them. But again, like Bob McTavish, just his kindness and happiness, and he's so sprite and still surfing really good. Like I think that again, there's like so many people you cross paths with. I think that, so I noticed there's like, different way, ideas of what you're going to do as you get to be, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. I mean, you look at like Doc Paskowitz, right? Like what a wild character he was. And then, becoming really close with Israel Paskowitz and hearing all the crazy stories over the years, you go like, he's angelic in a way, but man, what a wild path to get to that.
Sure.
That's the space he was towards the end of his life, you know?
Yep.
And the impact we have on all of the people that we know and our family members and all of that stuff. So there's definitely this school of guy that goes off and just keeps going to the next spot where nobody is, for decades. Decades. And kind of setting up his own little camp and making sure he has enough food and a little bit of fuel and for that next month, and does that until their 70s,
Yeah.
And then there's people that kind of build a community, in a place and kind of really take the time to, impart like what they've learned into like the next generations and stuff, and you find both of those things. And I've seen it, like some's a bit tragic, but also amazing and beautiful in its own way.
Yeah.
So
no, it's such an interesting thing because I think if there's a through line here, it's we surfers are travelers, and it's you get. I think of the Endless Summer. It's like there's this sort of model of what it means to be a surfer on a serious level, and if you do take it seriously, like inevitably you will go places. And I think that's probably different to a lot of other sports that just require a static field. If tennis, for instance, like it might be cool to go play tennis abroad, but it's going to be still the same dimensions and height of net, etc. But I think of the sort of social skills that you get along the way in just being able to kind of roll with punches, in be adaptable, be open and meeting people. And I think of my early trips, I distinctly remember traveling with Matt and Sam George, and they were just so gregarious and open with everyone. And I remember going, okay, that's what you got to do. Like you can't be shy and withdrawn because nothing will come to you, and you'll be left alone. But if you sort of put yourself out there, it's like this whole thing kind of takes flight. Were there moments like that for you when you were young, getting out there?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, yeah, everybody kind of has their different motives and their different sort of like what they're really trying to get out of the space, and I think that like when you do get to these, places that could be seen as like this Valhalla type, environment, it really accentuates people's personalities and what's making them tick and what's bugging them. And like, I remember being at maybe 12 foot on the face, perfect left in Indonesia. Martin Daly as our captain, of course, that's what you get when you're with Martin. And I think it was probably my 6th run out there to the islands with him. And I'm sitting on the rail of the boat and with 2 other goofy footers, right? So, and the man on my left is Gerry Lopez. The man on my right is Wayne Lynch. Very wise men. Yep. And very, very different state of mind. I could look to my right, and there's Wayne and Gerry, in such a different mind space. And I think I won't get into all the details about how different they were, but there was, for guys who are really thoughtful men who've got to experience some of the highest form of arguably in surfing history, they spent more time in the barrel and push limits, at least as far as I'm concerned and my influences, but very, very different translation of the moment.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
it's an interesting thing because I think there's this deep purity that I think we come to surfing fairly innocent more often than not. I would say probably you and I would share that. Like we came to it at a young age. Sure. We were in awe of good surfing. We were in awe of the people and the culture. And then you get into it and you kind of want it. And then in the wanting of it, you have to fit into this infrastructure. And that infrastructure is effectively like you get a sponsor, and that sponsor, funds you or puts you on a retainer or gives you something to go around and do this thing. But you do it with a lot of logos on your board. You do it under the guise of, you're going to photograph me. I'm going to be in your ads. I'm going to get pictures in magazines. I'm going to get in videos and films. And I think you and I have talked about this. There's a strange kind of push-pull thing of like, there's this great purity of I'm surfing around the world and I'm this like surfing missionary who's going to these new places and experiencing this thing. And then the flip side of it is like, I'm this bubblegum pro surfer who's a pawn for the brands,
It is super interesting. It's super interesting. And earlier today, we had those old tapes, right, from recordings I'd done with friends and heroes, 25 years ago. And we stumbled upon that conversation I had with Brock Little.
Yep.
And the way his summation of what a pro surfer was was pretty amazing.
Yes.
It was really, and I haven't heard that since he said it to me on the beach of Pipeline. I never listened to that tape.
Yeah.
So to hear that, we just heard that like an hour ago.
Yeah.
About how, I'm not even going to try to encapsulate what he said, but it was really matter of fact and shameless, and I would argue that a lot of the some of the guys who have been the most vocal about how candy ass pro surfers are have never swung a hammer in their life.
Yeah.
And they've done a really genius job of looking like these sort of like post-war Prussian peasants. Yet they're just way better at looking the way they want. They're curating, whereas there's so many different levels of motivation when it comes to what pro surfing is, and and what all kinds of surfing are.
Yep.
Yeah. I know a guy that surfs up the coast here that was his name, he was known as, Everyday Charlie, like the most, he got barreled every single day of his life for like half a century. And then one day he was like, cool, I think I had enough. Sold all his boards.
Wow.
Never surfed again.
No kidding.
Yeah. So there's that too. I'm just talking about the spectrum.
Sure. I kind of like cashing in your chips. That's an interesting one. I've thought about that sometimes because there can be that period of diminishing returns. And I think that's where sort of bitterness sets in on this thing that would like began as playfulness and this nimble flowing thing that we do with waves. And then it turns into this like hard calcified attitudes towards things, which you see a lot of.
Sure. And I think, one thing that I see in surfers with longevity is like, so you have the guys that really, it's admirable, but they're going out there to perform and see what they can do every day with a different surfboard design or a different lineup, and probably subconsciously proving to themselves that they still have it, and maybe they really enjoy letting their buddies know that they surfed and it was good. There's, that's real, a real thing.
Yep.
And then there's, and I really noticed this, there's like a school of people that keep surfing is that like being in the ocean for an hour a day or half an hour a day or 10 minutes a day. Like the surfing truly is like really an enjoyable aspect of it. But like I remember sitting with Mark Cunningham had taken me to go visit John Kelly in Black Point.
Okay, the great environmentalist.
Yes, yes. He took me down to his shop and let me hold the hatchet that he cut down the first hot curl with.
Wow.
Yeah, incredible afternoon. But it was very clear before we got there he needed to do his swim, jump off the rock there. He wasn't able to surf at that point. His mental faculties were failing a little bit too, but the smile he had when he got out of the water, he had just gone for a swim and felt the ocean, and I, not to get to, whatever, but like he had been surfing at that point for 65 years. And like, it was clear that he had made that jump from performance to just being in the ocean. And that's, I think, one of the reasons I relate to it. and why I had no problem riding more. I always say I'm a friend of foam these days, you know, like I do think that I just getting in the water, you know.
Yeah,
for
that's
me,
no, for sure.
my hips and my back don't do what they used to do.
Yep.
And I'm not going to pretend they do.
Yeah.
And just surf worse as I get older and
Sure.
think I'm surfing like I used to, because it's just not part of it. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's something about being out there that, and I think you as a director and filmmaker and myself as a writer, the thing that where surfing fits into my life is it just kind of reminds me of this sort of levity, this sort of lightness of heart and spirit, where it's there's a sense of play in the world, which is sometimes not easy to retain, but surfing kind of helps me do it for the most part. Although a really crowded day can do exactly the opposite.
Right. Well, you know, it's, you know, when we started surfing, a lot of people say that was the most fun they've had, and by all accounts, they couldn't surf. So you can't really even surf yet, but you still remember those more than maybe a big barrel you got.
Yes.
At least I do.
Yep.
And then as you get older, you start to get where you can't really surf anymore, but
Yep.
you're still like having really good memories, because
Yeah.
you realize every session, you know, means something.
Yep.
You know, because
For sure.
in 1990, like, it seemed like it would never end.
Yeah.
Just better boards, bigger barrels, longer barrels,
Yep.
more attention.
Yep.
And it just seemed, and it was like this thing that was just, you didn't really appreciate it because there was never enough,
Sure.
you know? And when you realize this is enough, like this is all I have.
Yeah. Yep. Let's talk filmmaking and directing. What got you interested, and then what was the first film that you made?
Yeah. So my interest in film started, I really got into not taking photography, but like, I guess studying, not the technical aspect, but like composition and light.
Yeah,
Like
I remember that. You always had an ear, and you were buying a lot of books, like still photography books.
I was.
Yeah.
Like, so I happened on to, like, you know, Henry Cartier-Bresson and
Yep.
Sebastião Salgado and these types, Ed Curtis and these, and I just was just fascinated by it. And I had no intention of ever making film or I always had a point shooter with me, you know, and then in 1997 I got hurt real bad at Pipeline. I had a real close call, and I was out of the water for 7 months, I think.
Okay.
So now it's 97. I'm in the middle of my, you know, getting paid to surf, but, you know, I start to see stuff happening. People are getting hurt. Some people are getting killed. And I'm like, maybe this isn't going to last forever. Mm-hmm. And I'd saved up some money, and it was right in the thick of the sort of like momentum generation thing, which I was so lucky and had so much fun being a part of. And, but I felt like, man, the Seversons and Witzigs and Albie Falzon and all these guys, like, they were making such cool stuff. And it was just, that was kind of forgotten, except for like a few people like Jack and Sonny.
Yep.
You know, and so, yeah. So I was like, let's make a 16 millimeter film. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'm going to get to surf again, like, and get paid to surf. You know, I don't know. And I wasn't by no means thinking that was it was going to fill the gap. Like, I just was figuring it. And I had this little interim. I had enough money to get by for a year. Mm-hmm. I'm like, let's make a surf film.
Yep.
And then just fell in love with it, you know, and was lucky enough to work with, you know, guys that had an incredible eye. You know, my first guy that I worked with was Jack Johnson. Yep. You know, before he was a musician, we were out making surf movies, you know. People don't understand, like, he's a really, really talented filmmaker.
Yep.
And camera operator.
Yeah. But Thicker Than Water was your first film?
Yes.
So well done. I now that I have more, I mean, I loved it when it came out, but I can look back now and I can think it was very advanced in the sense of, it was earnest and sincere at an age when so many of us were trying to be ironic and throw some sort of cleverness on things. And you really, like, it was a heartfelt film. I mean, even the title is like Such a good title, Thicker Than Water.
I always enjoyed coming up with titles. It's a fun thing because you can just you can sort of ruminate and sort of, I appreciate that.
So you come out of that film and then you get you heal, you're back still getting paid to be a pro surfer, and your surfing career carried on. But then you did a great job of sort of pairing, like you were still basically a pro surfer in the limelight in that regard, but also making stuff.
Yeah. And I really got to say, man, Bob Hurley at the time, he was really forthright with me and just like, man, you're not making heats, but any money you do make, you're going to New Guinea or you're going to Scotland or that's way better for me because you're getting covers, you're going and surfing Mavericks, the stuff that you love to do.
Yep.
And it's better for me. So let's just not do contests anymore, Chris. Like, you're barely making out of your first round. So go wherever you want and I'll pay for the plane ticket. You find a place to stay. And at that time you didn't expect like hotels really. Like that was no worries,
Yeah.
And you would like figure out a spot. And then, and so I just went on a tear for like over a decade of just like spinning the globe, man. It was really fun. And the equator was pretty well figured out by that time, the Mentawais and Tahiti, and so that's when. And I like cold, so that's when we started spending time in Ireland and up, in Europe and Alaska and Antarctica.
Antarctica. Let's talk about Antarctica.
Yeah,
what was that like?
That was great. That was a really great trip. Like I said, I'd just come off that 10, 12 days with Mickey Dora in Chile, and then I kept going south, and then, it was, Steve Hawk and Sedge Thompson and Kevin Starr, Doc Renneker, just a really cerebral crew.
Yep.
Art Brewer.
Yes.
Yes.
The late Art Brewer, rest his soul.
And Jerome Ponce, he was our captain. At 50-something, he was chain-smoking little roll-ups and red wine. And in the galley one day, there was the oh shit rail right there, and he knocked out a couple one-arm pull-ups with a rollie in his mouth.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jerome Ponce.
Incredible.
One night we were going through like this fjord thing, and I was in the bow. I was in the V-berth of the boat, and there was just this massive crash. Knocked me out of my bunk. I run up to the wheelhouse and I'm like, Jerome, was that a big rock? And he goes, just doesn't even look up, just takes a puff off his rollie and he goes, it was a big rock. Now it is many small rocks, Chris.
Wow.
Go back to bed.
Wow. Incredible.
A legend.
What a great bunch of people to go to Antarctica with, because I know I always really respected Doc Renneker. He was so like investigative and he would sort of research everything he did. So you would have sort of jumped, you were a young man still, but jumped on with these guys who really knew what they were doing.
Oh, it was
or at least
so
did their
good
research.
For me. Yeah, it was so good for me because I understood the company that I was with and that I was a shit kid. And like, I don't even know how I got invited on that trip. Parmenter was supposed to go. So I think that, I don't know. Steve Hawk, I was, I knew, and Art, I knew.
Yep.
Somehow I got on the trip.
Okay.
I was the stowaway.
Yep.
Yeah. And we, Doc's research was amazing. And we're out looking at maps and, comparing our route to where Shackleton, it was Shackleton was spoken about every day. And
incredible.
We went to where those guys holed up for that long period of time waiting for Shackleton to come back. And I found a little left right there. I named it Black Burrows Bubble after the cook on that boat who lost a toe at that encampment.
Wow.
And penguins and calving glaciers and lots of great conversation. And it's important to say that we did find a really good wave.
Okay.
A couple. A couple. But between the snowstorms and the water and Uncle Art his knee was for the last, I think 15 years was kind of hindered him. So by the time we got in our dry suits and got in the water, there were some sessions that kind of we weren't able to document, but that's okay. It didn't matter, we got to do it. So it wasn't, I see a lot of these ice surfing adventures now where, it's very clear that they went and found an iceberg and put on wetsuits and surfboards and basically stood there, and it's like surfing in the, in the Arctic or whatever. Like, we got waves, we got good waves, and there was waves. If we had been more mobile, there was a couple waves we just couldn't get to, and then a storm would hit, and we just never even could get in the water. But they're like my brother Dan and Ramon Navarro went back down there, and they got pretty much skunked.
Okay,
but we got waves, and I know where they are. Yeah. If anybody wants to go, I swear to God, it's like there's no secret spots in Antarctica. You can get there and you want to. I'll tell you right where they are.
Right. That's so great. So you made Thicker Than Water, and then the next film was September Sessions?
Yes.
Okay.
So September Sessions happened, actually, perfect segue. I was in Antarctica, so I wasn't on that trip. So Jack, that whole movie was shot in like less than 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so I came back and I was like, oh, how did I miss that trip? And then I'm like, where I was cool too. And so I helped design like the cover for it and worked on the name for it, ran a bunch of the interviews for it, and worked on it. But that basically was Jack shooting it in 10 or 12 days. That thing was almost edited in camera. I think the amount of outtakes from that or film that wasn't used is a small pile of film. And then my cousin Emmett was real involved. We were kind of a trio and involved in music and editing. And so it was fun. It all felt, I don't want to say easy, but like it just, we were lucky enough to have grown, spend so much time with our, when your crew is, Jack and Kelly and Rob and Shane and Ross and everything. It's just like, hey, Martin says he's got a wave for us. You guys want to go? Yeah, let's go. And then we went, and Gerlach's there to be amazing entertainment and bring on black belt level wave key. It was like, it just kind of felt good,
Yep. Did you, at that point, know that you would be a director later on?
No.
Did you start to get a taste?
No, I didn't have any intention of doing it. After Thicker Than Water, I had so much fun with it. I'm like, frick, let's just do it again.
Yeah.
So then I started doing some documentary stuff that was more, conservation minded. I was working with and for Yvon Chouinard as a friend, and then we ended up working with him directly and for him, doing a lot of conservation-minded documentary work, which was really an education in itself. I got to spend time with some incredible thinkers and agrarians, and coming from a place, Ojai in the 70s was an agrarian-based town, on a lot of levels, mainly through citrus and cattle in the hills, way up in the hills, back in the Sespe. And then having heroes in that world too as a young kid. And then having that coalesce through some of the work I did with and for Yvon Chouinard. So I started doing that, and then eventually the man came calling, and ended up doing commercial work for Ford and Chevy and Ram and Guinness and that stuff.
But what was great is when you started doing all that, it seemed like it was almost like you were bending them into your world than the other way around, which is not an easy thing to do with brands of that scale, I guess.
Right. When I finally did start doing with a 50, 60, 70 person crew and all the newest stuff and helicopters, and I thought I would hate it, but I actually realized that grip department, light department, wardrobe, electric, all these departments were such incredibly hardworking, talented people. And I got to come in and go, hey, folks, what do you think about this? And I got to go off a plan that I had built, and just, man, did I learn so much, it was so humbling. And to your point, I pigeonholed myself in that world as I'm going to get people, if you want climbers, I'm getting climbers.
Yep.
If you want cowboys, I'm getting cowboys.
Yep.
If you want surfers, I'm getting surfers. I really, really stayed away from doing that stuff with surfing. But And so, yeah, if you want to go somewhere amazing and really get a feeling of that with people that are living it, I've been very lucky because there's a need for that kind of aesthetic in that commercial world. And so that's what I've never shot on a sound stage or, anything like that.
More in the field type stuff.
Yeah.
Of all the films, commercials, short films, documentaries, etc., like is there something you're most proud of that you feel like it has your sort of thumbprint on it the most, like it's coming straight out of your heart?
Yeah, maybe a couple. There's a lot that I don't. It's pretty not memorable. Thicker Than Water was the most clear, kind of clear expression of how us kids saw surfing, and the people and the places. I think it was a celebration of all of that put together, and it was so kind of we were pretty dang innocent. We won the surf film of the year that year, and I no dream of anything like that, you know what I mean? And so that was I'll always remember that process and just being kid. I mean, nobody knew that there was a kid named Jack Johnson that could make a surf film and charged pipe and wrote a couple cool songs, or that Tim Lynch and my cousin Emmett and my brothers, and I really look at we all made that movie together, including the surfers.
Sure.
And so that, the first one, man, it's like a it's like a good drug, I guess. Like that first time, you're always chasing that.
Yeah,
chasing that. Huh?
Yeah.
And then some of the I've got to work with musicians and document what they're doing on some level that are, there's, I have a friend named JT Van Zandt. His father is Towns Van Zandt, who I grew up on. And I did a short film on him that I really am proud of.
Nice.
And even some, in the early days, I did art. I art directed some, videos for Ben Harper and G Love and some of those guys back in that period of time. Just getting to work on a set where the space, maybe the size of the room we're in right now, making every inch of it have try to echo what the lyrics and the music that we're, and they're just a flash, right? When you see the video, but I love that.
Yeah, that's nice.
Those little detailed things.
Yep. What? So tell me, you live in Los Alamos.
I live in Los Alamos, California, which is about 45 minutes north of Santa Barbara.
Okay. Married? How many children?
I have 3 kids. Yeah, 16, 14, and 7.
And you live on a ranch?
I do.
With livestock?
With livestock.
And horses and.
Yep.
No, I remember visiting you there, and I remember talking to you, and I said, when I didn't know you guys that well, and I knew you in the context of the surfing world.
Sure.
And I remember I'd see you guys, and I thought you guys were surfers pretending to be cowboys, but then later I realized you guys were actually cowboys all along.
We're cowboys pretending to be surfers.
Yeah. But when I went and visited you, I realized this is kind of where Chris started, and now he's here. But the time that I saw you was always in a different kind of scene than. Sure. But there's a real, it's really interesting because I think Central California in particular, there's a real connection between the kind of rolling hills and everything that's available in sort of the Ventura, Santa Barbara, Ojai area, and then the ocean. Sure. They seg together in a really interesting way.
Yeah, I think I agree. I agree, and I think I look in the surf kind of what's going on in surfing, and I don't keep up too much, but I see, you're going to see stuff, and sort of this earthy surf vibe that's kind of the thing right now, and it's every day where I live, I see people that are harvesting all morning, and they got dirty Carhartts, and they it's not that uncommon to be suiting up and hear somebody wearing spurs. A stock trailer pull up, and a guy's got a board stuffed in the nose of his trailer, and he's gonna ride young horses that morning and then surf that out. That is not that's not uncommon. It's not every day, but it's not out of this world. And then I see these brands coming up, and they're sort of parroting the notion. But I feel blessed to be in a place where it's actually kind of happening. And the term cowboy, by the way, I don't call myself a cowboy.
No.
I live on a ranch and I run cattle and I love to rope. I do all that stuff, but it's like, it's like it's that icky feeling of like when somebody goes, well, you guys are watermen. It's like, no. George Downing, like that you get called a cowboy or a waterman when you're 75, 80.
Yeah.
Not now.
No, you're right. And it is only a label, but I think I mean it more as a reference point. And I guess what I'm getting at is you guys were going back to what we were talking about earlier, where there's this sort of Orange County, the brands, the logos, the kind of surf industry thing that's very, very strong, which is to my mind, like almost diametrically opposed to the life that's up here.
Right.
Where does surfing fit into your life today?
You know what? I have not been surfing much lately. I've really focused on the ranch and our piece of dirt. Mm-hmm. And when I do get down to the water, I'm pushing kids into waves more than I'm chasing. There's times where I'm seeing really good waves right down the beach, and I know I'm going to get a text from my buddies that were like, dude, what are you doing down there? And I'm like, quickly get back to them. I'm hanging out with my fucking kids. Where are your kids? I don't really say that, but I'm like, I've got to like selfishly surf all day, every day for decades. Mm-hmm. And like right now, I really been perving on those like mid-length twin fins.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to get my hands on one of those and take my oldest son and maybe go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And although we have good waves where we live, so
yep, nice. So what do you feel like, having been deeply immersed for a long period of time in surfing and in the best sense of surfing, I think, what has it taught you? What's been a life lesson sort of takeaway that you can sort of apply to your life?
Yeah. The older I get, the more I realize how detrimental ego is. Mm-hmm. We talk about those elders that we've all got to spend time with, and the guys that have it doesn't mean that you're not going to be the best you can be, and whether it's film or writing or surfing, become better at what you love, Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the more we drop our egos, it's like all of a sudden you're surfing better. Yeah. You're writing better.
For sure.
Because you're writing it from your heart and mind rather than thinking about, even before you do the act of surfing or a creative endeavor, you're already thinking about how you're going to be judged. Yeah. And when you can sincerely let go of that, of like knowing you will be judged. Yeah. I think personally, I just get better at what you're doing, and then when the judgment inevitably does occur, you're okay with it.
Yeah. Do you still like big waves?
I do. I haven't been in big surf in a long time, but the last time I was in big surf was with Keone Watson, I think, and it's amazing how much fun big surf is when nobody's watching and you have nothing to prove. Mm-hmm. So now you're relying on being in the right place, waiting for the one you want. Mm-hmm. And like back as a younger man, you go, well, I don't know if I'm going to get this chance again, and I have to take every opportunity I get. Yeah. And it's so much more fun in big surf when you go, you know what? I don't feel good about this one. I think, I want it to be 95% that I'm going to make the drop. No. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's, and you can laugh. And I mean, when I go to Hawaii now and pipes pumping, you know what I do? I put on fins and I sit right in the channel, right in that zone, because I know the wave really, really well. Yeah. And just witnessing pipeline. Nice. Almost in the impact zone and just slithering through like an eel and coming up and watching the kids.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And you don't even have a board. You're just...
And I've had guys paddle out and be like, Malloy, what are you doing? You fucking went crazy. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm okay. Yeah. I'm good. This is beautiful. Maybe I'll have Uncle Mark Cunningham on this side of me or Adam Lerner here. Yeah. And stay cruising.
That's so nice. That's so nice. On that note, thank you so much, Chris. It's been great chatting.
Thank you, Jamie. Enjoyed it so much.
Soundings is produced by me, Jamie Brisick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Our theme song is Ohana by Farmer Dave and the Wizards of the West. Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal, a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Birdwell, FCS, Patagonia, Rainbow, Vans, Vissla, and Yeti. The Surfer's Journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.